Like we talked earlier, like Kim had mentioned about sitting around the kitchen table and talking. I guess we can all agree that communication is key, to always be able to communicate with our children, and letting them know that they can always communicate with us.
Yes.
And one of the practices I use with my daughters, even though they're 11 and 13, some subjects for being a dad are sometimes just a little bit to me they'll always be my little girls. But I make sure that my temperament is in a good place, and whatever they want to tell me, I'll listen. And afterwards, I can go to my wife and I go, "Honey, this is what they're telling me." But one of the things that you mentioned is you said evidence-based, and I think that's important. Can you talk about what that means?
Sure. These programs, the workshops that we bring to the community have been around for many years.
So think about their character. Who are they? What are they like? What's your relationship with them like?
And over 1 million families have participated all over the country during that time. And there have been studies done that followed many of those families over the long term. And they found that the parents who invested those 12 hours in the workshop, they're 6 2-hour sessions, so 12 hours altogether, that investment of 12 hours can result in benefits for the family that last a decade. And those benefits might look like kids that are making better decisions, making healthy decisions, closer family relationships where everybody is on the same page when it comes to family values, better problem solving, all of those things. In addition to those studies that were done, these programs are also listed in the National Registry for Evidence-Based Programs and Practices. So they're recognized nationally as being effective programs.
I really like that. I like how you just mentioned, you touched on something very important, and that was the investment of time. When we talk about investments, we think about, from a monetary aspect, then the return of interest you get on making a good monetary investment. But with the return of investment on investing in your children, to talk to them and spend that time is priceless.
Absolutely.
And it sounds like active parenting is really important. Take a minute to tell the viewers some of the ways to teach parents to use this style.
First of all, we talk about parenting styles, and we have the passive doormat style of parenting where the kids kind of call the shots, and those parents tend to hope for their kids' cooperation. And then on the other end of the spectrum, we have the autocratic, dictatorial type parent who tries to demand their child's cooperation. And an active parent kind of falls in the middle of that spectrum between those two extremes, where the parent will provide appropriate boundaries and give their child freedom within those appropriate boundaries. As the child grows and becomes ready for increased freedom by showing increased responsibility, then the parent can kind of expand those boundaries. Active parents also include their children in family decisions. They welcome their children's participation in the family. That doesn't mean that the kids always get their way. They like to say in the program that the kids have their say, they don't necessarily get their way. The parents are still very much the leaders of the family. Another thing that's important is that active parents allow their kids to grow by allowing them to deal with certain problems. They don't try to run in and smooth away and make everything nice and smooth and easy for their kids all the time. They know, when it's appropriate to allow their child to struggle, knowing that their child will grow and become stronger and a better problem solver in the end.
And it's truly a fine line, like you mentioned earlier. The doormat component. Where the child gets their way. And then also you have the extreme was when you hear something, you're very reactive to the point where you almost push it away, but they don't want to tell you anything anymore.
Right.
But the bottom line, I think the foundation of all that is being active with your children, communicate with your children, and spending time, because that you develop a relationship that you have to the point where it becomes a a safety line, but not something that's going to stifle them or hinder you from doing what you're doing.
Right.
Kim, you said earlier that getting them through their teen years is the key. Why are children and teens so much at risk today?
Well, part of it is just because of the physiological and the physical development of their brain. You know, the teen brain does not complete its development until about the mid-20s. And the last part of the brain to develop is this, prefrontal cortex that we have. You can kind of think of that as the executive command center. That's where impulse control takes place, morality, evaluating consequences, using good judgment, risk-taking, those type of things, all function up here, and that doesn't finish developing until about the mid-20s. So if you think about it, over the years, there's been one industry that was aware of that and used that to their advantage. The one thing that you can't do until you're 25 years old is rent a car. So obviously, they looked at the statistics of accidents and saw that after age 25, accident rates dropped off. And that's because the brain is beginning to work as a whole. Before age 25, you have kind of the emotional center. You know how teens can be so emotional. Overacting, and they have a lack of impulse control. So this is one of the reasons why we have to develop that relationship with our kids. And as Theresa was saying, have that rescue plan. That's something that we need to work with our kids, building those resiliency skills over and over again, because they don't remember, and they tend to react before they stop and think. So as your child's heading out the door, even just a quick, hey, before you leave, remember, stop and think. Don't just jump into something. Think about the consequences and make good decisions, okay? There might be beer at this party that you're going to. How would you react if somebody said, hey, do you want a beer? What would you say? And get that planted right at the forefront of their mind, because we want those responses to be quick. No thanks, I don't want a beer. Do you have a soda?
That's incredible advice. And I love the idea of a rescue plan, because when most people think of a rescue plan, we think of it reacting during an emergency, whether it's a fire, whether it's a natural disaster. Even though we might not implement that emergency plan, we're always ready. We know what to do. And I think this is some great advice that you're giving our audience out there, is that to have this rescue plan, because those dangers are out there that will affect our children, our friends or family. And so I'm really glad that you're giving us that advice. We have one of your PSAs that illustrates brain development very well. Let's take a look.
One of the areas still maturing in an adolescent brain is the prefrontal cortex. So when we take drugs, we alter key motivational circuits, changing the wiring needed for the cognitive function of the brain, until we can't totally deal with things like memory, thinking things out, and even learning stuff.
The signs are there. So is our help. Visit the partnership at drugfree.org for practical advice on coping with teen drug use.
Fortunately, that transformation doesn't happen that fast. It happens over time.
Yes, that's very true, and that's why it's so important for parents to act as filters for their kids during that time when they're so vulnerable, those teen and young adult years. We have to think about the think, feel, do cycle. What goes in is what's going to come out. What a child hears and thinks about is going to resonate. That's going to affect the way they think. That's going to affect the way that they feel. And then that's going to determine what they do or what they say. So it's very important for parents to be involved and act as a filter for their kids.
Absolutely, and that's very important. And it's important in saying that. Theresa, how can parents find out about the programs you offer?
Well, if they go to our website, drugfreeaz.org, they can find a listing of all the offerings that we have in the community. They're all over the valley. Many of them are offered right here in Glendale, so we hope your viewers will visit our calendar on the website. There's also prevention, intervention, treatment information, webinars, the drug guide that's very useful, that parents can educate themselves about the substances in their children's world out there. There's some teen resources to help teens learn how to handle negative peer pressure, and also information if anybody's interested in having us come out and speak
Well, ladies, I really want to thank you for being here today. You gave us some very important information that I know that people will be able to access and help their children or help somebody they know. Thank you for being my guest, Kim and Theresa.